Hello, my name is Emery. I was in the middle of closing a multi-million-dollar deal when I found out my grandmother had been sitting alone at a train station for 9 hours, cold, hungry, and still believing someone from our family would come. They didn't. They were all at the lake house, sipping wine, taking selfies, laughing in the sun. Not one of them mentioned her name. Not one of them looked back. And the worst part? I think they planned it that way. Why would a family go that far to erase the one person who built everything they now claim to own? Would you like to know? Friday morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of my San Francisco apartment, spilling across the hardwood floors. The kettle whistled gently as I reviewed the notes for the meeting I'd spent months preparing for, something with too many zeros and too much pressure. A funding deal that could change everything for my firm. I should have been focused, and I was, for a while. Until the group chat started buzzing, it was the family thread, titled, ironically, Team Halden Forever. A name Vera, my mother, had picked years ago like some kind of badge of honor. She liked names, appearances, clean group chat titles, smiling family portraits. What she didn't like, apparently, was responsibility. The first message was from Isolde, my sister. "Mom, what time does Grandma's train get in again?" Then came Vera. "Sacramento Valley Station, 10:15 a.m. That was in less than 3 hours. I stopped stirring my tea. Leora chimed in next, as if she'd been waiting for her cue. "I can't do the pickup. I've got an interior consult at 11. I'll be out of town by then." Zinnia. "I'd love to help, but I've got the cake delivery for the party window between 9:30 and 11:30. If I leave, I lose the slot." Avon. "She can call a cab. We're not savages." I stared at the screen. There it was, casual, dismissive, soaked in entitlement. The assumption that someone else would handle it, that Grandma, Eleanor, our matriarch, was just a logistical inconvenience, not a human being, not the woman who raised 3 daughters, paid off 2 mortgages, and kept our fractured family barely tethered through decades of dysfunction. I typed slowly, controlling the urge to sound angry. Can someone please confirm they're picking her up? 3 dots bubbled, then disappeared. Nothing. My stomach tensed. I glanced at the time. 7:48 a.m. My meeting was at 10. No way I could get to Sacramento and back in time, not with Bay Area traffic and this being a Friday. And they knew that. That's why I hadn't been expected to join the Lake House reunion until Sunday. We'd agreed. We'd planned. I picked up my phone and texted Mom directly. "Just checking. You've got a plan to get Grandma, right? Her train lands soon." 2 minutes later, I got a voice note in response. I hesitated. She rarely sent voice messages. Vera preferred the curated neatness of written replies. I tapped the play button. "Oh, Emery," she said, followed by a dry chuckle. "She's fine. Don't worry so much." That was it. No plan, no name, no assurance that anyone would actually be there waiting when Grandma stepped off that train. Just that sarcastic, patronizing tone I'd known since I was 12, the one she reserved for when she thought I was overreacting. "She's fine." The same words she'd said when I came home with a split lip after a boy shoved me at summer camp. "She's fine." When Grandma was left out of the family photo at Isolde's wedding because she didn't fit the aesthetic. I held the phone in my palm, letting those words sink into the silence of my apartment. The kettle had stopped. My tea was cold. I stared at the screen a few seconds longer before locking it and placing it face down. She's fine. I could have canceled the meeting. I could have rearranged everything and driven to Sacramento myself. But I didn't, because they said they'd handle it. And I needed to believe that this time they meant it. That this time, Grandma wouldn't be forgotten. I finished my tea and returned to my laptop. I had a presentation to rehearse, slides to finalize, a firm to represent. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was the youngest, the dramatic one, that I was making too much of it. But the pit in my stomach didn't agree. They all claimed to love her, especially when it suited them. When she was needed for a babysitting emergency or to lend money with no questions asked. But when it came time to pick her up from a train station, she became a burden to delegate. I remembered a Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Grandma had made her famous cranberry stuffing from scratch, spent all day in the kitchen, apron dusted with flour, humming while she chopped and stirred. When she brought it to the table, Leora barely glanced up. "Oh," she said, "we already have two kinds of stuffing." Grandma smiled politely and placed the dish on the side. No one touched it. I did, because I saw her hands tremble when she served herself a spoonful, as if trying to prove it wasn't wasted. They never noticed things like that, but I did. I always did. My phone buzzed again. Another group chat message. Zinnia. Sun is perfect at the lake today. Can't wait to toast to the Halden legacy tonight. Avon. Lake looks insane. Got the jet skis prepped. Let's go. The pit in my stomach twisted harder. No mention of Grandma, no check-in to see if she'd landed, no picture of someone at the station holding a sign with her name. Nothing. They were already at the lake house. The one she helped pay for. The one they posted about like it was theirs alone. I closed the chat. I looked down at my notes, the graphs and projections suddenly a blur. Numbers swam in front of me, meaningless. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then dropped to my lap. I thought about the way Grandma used to tuck handwritten notes into my school lunchbox, even in high school. How she mailed birthday cards a week early, just in case the mail was slow. How she sat through every one of my piano recitals, even when arthritis made the wooden chairs unbearable. She's fine, they said. But she wouldn't be. I didn't know yet how bad it would get. But somewhere, in the place behind my ribs that always seemed to sense these things too early, I knew. I knew something was about to go very, very wrong. That doubt started years ago, the first time I saw them leave her behind. Not physically, not with bags packed or a door slammed in her face. It was more subtle than that. It was in the rolled eyes, the muttered complaints, the way her stories were brushed off like irrelevant static. I learned early that in our family, ignoring someone was more brutal than arguing with them. I was 19 when it finally sank in. It was Christmas, and I had just come home from my first semester of college. The tree was lit, the fire was going, and the Halden house smelled like cinnamon candles and overcooked turkey. The kind of perfect picture Vera loved to force-feed guests and followers. Grandma had spent the afternoon baking her signature gingerbread cookies, real ones, not the box-mixed junk my sister Isolde swore by. They were soft in the middle, slightly crisp at the edges, spiced just right. She brought them over in a large red tin with a velvet bow. She even added a handwritten note taped under the lid. "Merry Christmas, my darlings." I watched from the hallway as Isolde opened the tin in the kitchen. She didn't even glance at the cookies. "Why does she keep doing this?" she muttered, tossing the lid aside like it was trash. "She's getting senile." Vera stood next to her, glass of white wine in hand, nodding. "She just wants attention." Like always. Then, quieter, barely above a whisper, but loud enough for me to catch it. "I swear, sometimes I think she just keeps hanging on to make everything more complicated." I didn't make a sound. I didn't move. I just stood there, frozen, while my stomach clenched. I wanted to believe I'd misheard, that the twinkle in Vera's voice was sarcasm or some sick brand of humor, but it wasn't. It was fatigue, annoyance, and worst of all, honesty. That night, I found Grandma in the laundry room, quietly washing the dish towels while the party carried on upstairs. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes were distant. Not sad, just used to it. Like she'd long since stopped expecting anything different. And I hated that. I hate it now, years later, as I picture her sitting alone at the station, because of course, she would have gotten there early. Grandma was never late. Not for weddings, not for birthdays, not even for doctor's appointments that no one else bothered to attend with her. It was just past 10:30 a.m. when her train rolled into Sacramento Valley Station. I could see it in my head, how she probably waited for the crowd to clear before stepping off, dragging her little roller bag with the faded floral print, wearing that pale blue cardigan she always brought for travel days. She would have paused at the bottom of the platform ramp, scanning the crowd with a hopeful look that faded by the minute. No one was there. Not Vera, not Isolde, not Avon or Zinnia. Nobody. The waiting area at that station has these long wooden benches. They look charming in photos, but are as unforgiving as concrete. Drafts sweep in through the automatic doors every time a bus pulls up. If you sit too long, your back aches for days. I imagined her sitting there, purse clutched tightly in her lap, ticket stub still in hand, even though no one needed it anymore. It's what she always did when she was nervous. She'd keep holding the one thing she thought might anchor her to the moment. The bottle of water I knew someone offered her probably sat unopened beside her on the bench. She wouldn't have touched it. Not because she wasn't thirsty, but because she didn't want to miss anyone. What if they came and didn't see her? What if they thought she had stepped away? And the food. Maybe a sandwich in a brown paper bag from the small cafe near the terminal. Someone must have tried to be kind, seeing her sitting there. But she would have politely declined. She always said eating alone made her feel lonelier. I sat in the glass conference room of my office building, 10 floors above Market Street, staring at a PowerPoint slide I couldn't even read anymore. My team was discussing a revenue forecast, voices drifting in and out like background noise. Chloe, my assistant, glanced at me from the corner of the room, but I waved her off. I had told myself she'd be fine. I had chosen work. And now, every second that passed without confirmation, without an update from anyone, felt like a brick being stacked on my chest. I tapped my phone screen. Still no messages, no missed calls, no photos, no got her update. Just silence, just nothing. They wouldn't really forget her, right? I tried to justify it. Maybe someone was late. Maybe there'd been traffic. Sacramento wasn't exactly next door, and weekend travel was always unpredictable. Maybe someone had picked her up and just forgot to say so. My brain scrambled to rationalize, to explain away the silence as anything but what I already feared. But my heart knew better. It remembered every time Vera used the word burden when referring to Grandma. Every time Isolde laughed and said, "She lives in the past, Emery. She can't keep up anymore." Every time Avon changed the subject when Grandma's name came up during financial discussions. Every eye roll, every missed call. Every family gathering where she was left out of the conversation because she wouldn't get it anyway. I remembered all of it now. I imagined her legs stiff from the long ride. Her fingers curled from arthritis, gripping the handle of her suitcase too tightly. I imagined her checking her watch, even though the hands had probably blurred from squinting too long. And I imagined her hope, still there, still flickering, because that's who she was. She believed in the good in people, even after they'd disappointed her 100 times. She kept believing because it was easier than accepting that she didn't matter. I couldn't sit through another minute of this meeting. I rose from the chair, excused myself with a tight-lipped smile, and stepped out into the hallway. I leaned against the cool glass wall, San Francisco's skyline stretching endlessly below me. I glanced at my phone again. Still nothing. If I'd been there, I would have sat beside her, and she wouldn't have been alone on that bench. Instead, they were raising champagne glasses at the lake house. I remember that moment like someone had punched me in the chest. One of those ridiculous, overly filtered photos popped up in the group chat. Everyone in coordinated outfits on the deck, sunlight glinting off the lake behind them, smiles too wide to be real. Vera, of course, had her wine glass raised high, her signature pose. Isolde captioned it, "Hat family first." Zinnia added, "Best vibes ever." And then, clear as day, Avon commented under the post, "It's quieter without her." I froze. My thumb hovered above the screen, not knowing whether to drop the phone or throw it. They meant Grandma, obviously. Who else would they be talking about? The phrase echoed in my mind like a bell. Quiet, without her. I pushed back from the conference table, the wheels of my chair screeching lightly against the polished floor. A couple of heads turned, but I didn't care. I stood, needing air, or distance, or both. My body moved before my brain caught up. I walked out of the conference room and into the corridor where the noise of the city below could still be heard faintly through the sealed windows. I pressed my forehead to the glass, willing the cool to calm me down. They were celebrating without her. Toasting with drinks at a house she helped pay for, posing for pictures without the woman who made half of them who they were. And the worst part? They weren't even trying to hide it. A sharp buzz in my hand snapped me out of it. It wasn't the group chat this time, an unknown number. My stomach clenched, and for a second, I hesitated. Then I tapped the message open. This is Marla, a staff member at Sacramento Valley Station. Your grandmother, Eleanor Myers, is still here. She's been waiting since 10:15 a.m. No one has come to pick her up. Her phone is nearly dead. The world around me went muffled. I reread the message 3 times, hoping I was misinterpreting something. But no, it was clear. It was blunt. It was real. Grandma was still there, alone, and it was nearly 4 p.m. My fingers moved with urgency. Is she okay? Can you please stay with her? I'm trying to reach someone now. I'm in San Francisco. The reply came within seconds. She's okay, just tired, cold, she hasn't eaten. She didn't want to leave in case someone came. I sank down onto a bench just outside the office hallway, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I could barely feel my breath. My thoughts were coming in jumbled, panicked waves. They left her. They really left her. And not one of them said a word. No apology, no check-in, no we're running late. Nothing. Just champagne and hashtags and fake smiles. I pulled up the group chat again and scrolled back through the morning. Not one message about Grandma. Not one comment asking if she'd arrived. No one had even thought to follow up. I wanted to scream. Instead, I reread the station worker's message, each word cutting deeper. Grandma had been sitting there for nearly 6 hours. Probably on one of those freezing benches with a stiff back and no cushion. The kind of bench that makes your spine ache and your knees throb. I could picture her, hands folded in her lap, cardigan pulled tight across her chest, eyes watching the doors, hopeful every time someone walked through. And no one came. Not a single damn one of them. I should have gone. I should have canceled the meeting. I should have never trusted them. But I had. Because I still wanted to believe, despite everything, that they'd do the right thing this time. And now? Now she was sitting in a cold train station with a dying phone and an empty stomach, still hoping someone, anyone, would walk through that door and say, "We're here." My pulse thudded in my ears. She hasn't eaten. That part made me want to put my fist through a wall. She didn't eat because she was scared of leaving her spot, scared she'd miss them, scared they'd come and leave again if she wasn't right there. I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes and sat in silence for several long seconds, trying to pull myself together. The meeting inside the glass room kept going. I could see their silhouettes talking, flipping charts, pointing at graphs. I was supposed to be in there, discussing numbers with 3 venture capitalists about to fund a $26 million deal. But suddenly, none of that mattered. Because my grandmother was sitting on a cold bench, ignored, dismissed, forgotten. Not by strangers, by her family, by mine. I stood up slowly, phone still in hand, and walked back toward the glass door. Chloe, my assistant, looked at me through the pane with concern. I gave her a small shake of my head, signaling I'd explain later. I paused in front of the door, gripping the handle but not turning it. My other hand hovered over the phone. I opened the group chat again. My thumb hovered over the message icon. I wanted to blast them. I wanted to type something that would finally make them feel even a fraction of the guilt they deserved. But I didn't. Not yet. I looked down at the last photo they posted at the lake. Avon pouring wine, Zinnia flipping her hair back like a shampoo commercial, Vera with her sunglasses and smug little smirk, and in the background, the chair Grandma usually sat in. Empty. And that's when I knew I couldn't just sit here and let them do this to her again. That's when I saw the photo, every face smiling, except hers and mine. It was posted by Zinnia, of course. She had the most polished social media presence out of all of them. Her captions always sounded like they'd been copied and pasted from a Pinterest board. "Perfect day with everyone here," it read, accompanied by sparkles and hearts. I clicked on the image, letting it fill my screen. There they were, my family, lined up on the wooden deck of the lake house. Avon holding a beer with his signature smug grin, Isolde in a linen sundress she definitely bought for the aesthetic, and Vera. God, Vera with her oversized sunglasses, head tilted just right, glass of Chardonnay lifted in mid-toast. All of them laughing, sun-kissed and comfortable. But the chair where Grandma always sat? It was decorated with a throw pillow. A decorative throw pillow. Not a single word in the caption about her not being there. Not a mention of her train, her arrival, her existence. You could look at that picture and believe she never existed at all. I zoomed in slightly. Behind Vera's chair, on the small bistro table, was the photo frame Grandma had given them years ago. One of the few keepsakes she'd handed down after moving out of her house. She'd filled it with a picture of the lake house in winter, snow blanketing the deck, a note written in cursive ink tucked inside. For every season, this place has a piece of my heart. They kept the frame, but they didn't keep her. I felt a sharp ache deep in my chest. The kind that doesn't scream, it just pulses like a bruise. That empty chair was more than a forgotten spot. It was an edit, a deliberate omission, a placeholder that screamed, "She's not part of this anymore." I sat there in silence for a few seconds, just absorbing it. It wasn't the forgetting that hurt the most. It was the pretending. They weren't just ignoring Grandma. They were erasing her. I tapped out of the photo and scrolled down to the comments. Zinnia replied to someone, "Wish Emery could have made it too, but she's got her hands full with her company stuff. So proud of her." That part made me laugh. Out loud, bitterly. They weren't proud of me. They tolerated me. They tolerated me the same way they tolerated Grandma, until we got inconvenient. Until we had needs. Opinions. Boundaries. I clicked back into the group chat, still buzzing with messages. Isolda. OMG, the sunset is even better than last year. Avon. Boats gassed up, taking the twins tubing after lunch. Vera. Don't forget to bring in the cushions before it gets dewy. Not a single damn word about Grandma. I opened a new message window and typed out a direct message to Vera. Where is she now? Who was supposed to pick her up? I waited. The chat kept moving, but she didn't reply. I tapped again, sent the same message to the group. Still nothing. 3 minutes passed. 5. I watched the bubble appear for a moment, someone typing, then disappear again. Instead, Zinnia sent a new selfie of her and Isolda holding up glasses of sangria. Living our best life. That phrase. I hated it. Living your best life doesn't mean leaving your mother at a train station. Living your best life doesn't mean lying to your youngest sibling, saying you'd figure it out, then ghosting when it came time to step up. I stared at my screen so hard, my eyes began to water. My shoulders stiffened, my throat tightened, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely angry. Not frustrated, not resigned, furious. I could take a lot from them. Passive-aggressive remarks, subtle digs, the constant undercutting of everything I built without their help. But this wasn't just careless. This was calculated. They made a conscious choice to act like she didn't matter, like she wasn't worth the 40-minute drive, like her existence was a noise they could mute for the weekend so they could sip sangria on the deck and pretend they were the picture-perfect family Vera always curated. And me? I'd been the idiot who believed they'd changed. I looked back at the photo one more time. That empty chair. That damn decorative pillow. Grandma would have never asked for much. A ride, a hug, a glad you're here. But they gave her none of it. And now she was sitting alone at a station, probably cold, possibly hungry, and still, hoping they'd come. That was the part that gutted me. She still believed they would come. I grabbed my keys off the table and stood. I didn't even realize how hard I'd clenched my jaw until I felt the tension in my temples. I hadn't made a plan yet, but I knew I couldn't stay here, not in this apartment, not with those messages lighting up my phone like everything was normal. Because nothing about this was normal. Before stepping out the door, I looked down at my phone one last time and typed a message into the group chat. Just so you know, she's still at the station, hasn't eaten, her phone is about to die. But hey, at least the sunset's pretty. I hit send. I could take a lot from them, but not this. 4 hours later, I was standing in front of her, and she smiled like she'd been expecting me all along. I saw her before she saw me. Sacramento Valley Station had quieted down a bit as the evening crept in. The late summer sun cast long shadows across the floor, and the usual bustle of travelers had softened to a low murmur. But there she was, still on that same bench, still clutching her purse in both hands like a life vest. Her cardigan looked even thinner now, barely shielding her from the cool air drifting through the automatic doors. And her ticket? Still in her lap, wrinkled and clutched like it meant something anymore. She turned her head as I approached, and the moment our eyes met, something unspoken passed between us. Her face lit up, not with surprise, but with calm relief, like she had known, deep down, that I'd come, like I was the last part of her dignity still left intact. "I knew you'd come," she said. Not accusing, not bitter, just sure. That was the moment it broke me. Not into tears. There was no space for crying. It broke me open, into something sharp and focused. I dropped to a crouch in front of her and reached for her hand. It was cold, the kind of cold that made me furious. She should have been warm. She should have been wrapped in a fleece throw, sipping tea on a porch, not parked in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I should have been here sooner." Her smile didn't fade. "You're here now. That's all that matters." It wasn't, but I didn't argue. Her roller bag was beside her, one wheel tilted from wear. Her shoes, simple leather slip-ons, were scuffed, the backs caved in from being stepped on too quickly. I glanced at the seat next to her. A neatly folded paper bag sat untouched. Inside, a sandwich someone must have bought for her. And next to that, a bottle of water, still sealed. "You didn't eat?" I asked. She shook her head. "Didn't want to miss anyone, in case they came." I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to react. The food was there, the water was there, but she chose hunger over the fear of being forgotten again. She was afraid if she blinked too long they'd appear and disappear without her even noticing. I stood and gently took her bag handle with one hand, her elbow with the other. She leaned on me without hesitation. She was light, too light, and I could feel the stiffness in her movements as she stood. A station attendant, a young woman maybe in her early 20s, stepped over to us. "Are you family?" "Yes," I said. "She didn't want to trouble anyone," the attendant said. "Kept saying someone would be here any minute." "Thank you for staying with her," I managed. "She reminded me of my own grandma," the girl said, her eyes glancing at Grandma with a softness that made me feel even worse. "She's been so polite, so patient." I nodded, unsure what to say. Anything I said would only feel like an excuse, and I had none. Grandma didn't say a word as we exited the station. The sky had turned a dusky lavender, the last edge of daylight slipping behind the trees. I helped her into the passenger seat of my car and buckled her in gently, like she used to do for me when I was little. As I closed the door, I paused a second just to look at her. She was so small in that seat, so quiet, so trusting. When I got in behind the wheel, I didn't start the car right away. I just sat there, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. She was looking out the window, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just spent her day being erased. "Do you want to go to the house?" I asked. She looked over at me. "Yours?" I nodded. She smiled again. "Yes, that sounds nice." And just like that, it was decided. I pulled away from the station slowly, the soft hum of tires on asphalt, the only sound between us. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't speak. I just drove. It was nearly 2 hours back to San Francisco. She dozed off halfway through, her head tilted slightly toward the window, fingers still interlocked in her lap. Every now and then, she'd twitch like she was dreaming. I wondered if it was about the lake house, about the porch swing, about her 3 children who couldn't be bothered to drive 40 miles. By the time we reached my apartment, it was fully dark. I helped her upstairs, offered her the shower first, and while she cleaned up, I made her tea. I knew how she liked it, black with 2 teaspoons of honey. I set out an old blanket on the couch and fluffed the pillows, though I already knew I'd be giving her my bed that night. When she stepped out of the bathroom, hair still damp, she looked years younger somehow, like shedding the station had peeled a weight off her. I handed her the tea and walked her to the bedroom. She turned to me at the door and whispered, "Thank you." I shook my head. "This won't happen again." She nodded, and I meant it. I stood in the hallway after she closed the door and exhaled a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding all day. They left her, but I wouldn't. Not again. I walked to the living room, sat on the edge of the couch, and opened the group chat again. I stared at the screen, messages still trickling in, photos of dinner, the lake at sunset, Isolde's kids roasting marshmallows. I didn't respond. Not yet. I wasn't going to tell them off. Not yet. I had something better in mind. The station attendant caught my arm before we left, as if she needed me to understand just how long Grandma had been waiting. She was maybe in her early 20s, nervous-looking, but sincere. Her name tag read Marla. I remembered her face from earlier. She was the one who had brought over a blanket when Grandma started shivering. "Can I tell you something?" she asked, glancing back toward the empty bench where Grandma had been sitting just moments before. I nodded. She stood up every time the doors opened. Every single time. Like clockwork. Her voice cracked a little as she said it. I felt the air catch in my lungs. She'd look at every face that came through like she was sure one of them had to be for her. And when they weren't... Marla shook her head. She just sat back down, waited a bit, and then did it again when the next train came in. She asked me the time at least a dozen times, but always with a smile, like she didn't want to seem like a bother. There was a silence between us, heavy and unspoken. She kept saying, "They'll be here any minute." I closed my eyes for a moment, pressing my lips together until the pressure passed. Thanking her felt too small. Apologizing on behalf of my family felt even smaller. So instead, I nodded once, placed a hand on her arm, and whispered, "You did the right thing texting me." Marla smiled a little, but it didn't reach her eyes. I could tell the image of Grandma sitting on that bench was going to stay with her for a long time. It was going to stay with me longer. Once we got home, I helped Grandma out of the car, guided her up the front steps to my apartment building, and let her lean on me the entire elevator ride to my floor. She didn't speak, and neither did I. Sometimes the silence says everything. Inside, I got her settled on the couch with a blanket draped over her knees and her teacup gently warmed in the microwave. She sat with it between her hands, gazing down as if the steam held something she hadn't quite figured out how to say. "I really am fine, you know," she said eventually, glancing up at me with that tired smile. "I know you are," I replied. "But you shouldn't have had to be." She didn't answer that. Later, after I'd tucked her into my bed and pulled the door mostly shut, I sat down with my laptop to send out a few emails, one to cancel a meeting, another to reschedule a pitch. I wasn't going to Tahoe anymore. I didn't even feel like I was part of that family this weekend. As I passed by the coat rack, I grabbed her cardigan to hang up. That's when I noticed it. The deep blue bruise along her forearm, just above the wrist. It was fading into a sickly yellow at the edges. I stared at it for a long moment, unsure how I hadn't seen it earlier. The fabric must have hidden it until now. I brought the cardigan closer, checking for any tears or dirt, but it was clean. The bruise, though, that wasn't from a fall or one mistake. It was from repetition, force against the same spot, over and over again. The next morning, I asked her casually over breakfast. "Your arm," I said gently. "What happened?" She looked at the bruise and blinked like she'd forgotten it was even there. Then she shrugged. "Oh, that? I kept bumping into the bench every time I stood up to look at the door. Silly, really. Why didn't you tell anyone?" She gave a faint laugh. Didn't seem important. Didn't seem important. That sentence stuck to my ribs like glue. A bruise from standing up too many times, just to check if someone cared enough to come. That was the kind of hurt my family didn't even believe in. Quiet pain, soft disappointment, wounds you couldn't post a selfie next to. I went into the bathroom, closed the door behind me, and gripped the edges of the sink. They had done this. They might not have struck her, but they left her there to wear herself down, to weight herself into exhaustion, into soreness. They left her with no coat, no food, no reassurance. Just hope. Hope so stubborn she kept standing up long after it stopped making sense. And the bruise? That was proof. Proof of all the times they said, "She's fine." Proof of every time they treated her like a prop, something that belonged in their lives only when convenient. I didn't need an apology anymore. I needed the truth to come out. That evening, after Grandma had dozed off again, I opened my laptop and started gathering everything. The photo Zinnia had posted from the lake house, with that empty chair. The timestamp of the station worker's first message to me. A screen capture of the unanswered text I'd sent to the group asking who was supposed to pick her up. And I took a picture. Not of Grandma, not in her sleep. That felt wrong. But I took a photo of the bruise on her arm, just close enough to see the coloring. Just real enough to remind them this wasn't some dramatic overreaction, this was their doing. I uploaded it all into a folder, named it Truth. I wasn't ready to send it, not yet. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want them dragged publicly, at least not yet. But I wanted to be ready. I wanted them to see, someday, the evidence, to have to face the version of events they worked so hard to pretend didn't exist. And if they wanted to pretend this never happened, I was going to make sure the whole world remembered it. By the next morning, her face was everywhere, and none of them could hide from it. It started quietly, with a post from a woman named Trina, someone I didn't know, but instantly respected. She'd been at the station that day. While I was still arguing with myself in a boardroom about whether to walk away from a multi-million-dollar deal, Trina was watching my grandmother sit silently, hands folded over her purse, eyes trained on the doors with that same tired hope she always carried. The photo she posted wasn't flashy, it wasn't staged, it was raw, candid. Grandma on the bench, that pale blue cardigan buttoned up all the way to her neck, the purse on her lap, the water bottle unopened by her side. Her lips were pressed together like she was trying to keep her emotions inside, and her feet barely touched the floor. The caption was simple. This sweet lady has been sitting here for hours waiting for her ride. Says her family is coming. I really hope they are. She reminds me of my Nana. By 9 a.m., it had over 12,000 shares. By noon, a local news outlet had picked it up. The station had been tagged in the comments. Then the city's public transportation account. Then hashtags started forming. Had not family. First, had she deserved better. No one came. That's when the messages started flooding in. People were offering to pick her up, asking if she needed a meal, a ride, a blanket. Others were tagging friends, asking if they recognized her. Some assumed she was abandoned. Some assumed she had dementia. Some assumed she was homeless. But no one, not one of them, assumed that her own family had chosen not to come. The hardest part to read. She looked so dignified, even sitting there like that, like she's holding on to some hope, even if it's been taken away from her. That comment nearly broke me. I hadn't even shared anything yet. I hadn't uploaded the bruise. I hadn't posted the group chat screenshots. I hadn't said a word. But I didn't have to, because the world was already seeing her, the way she deserved to be seen. I stood in the kitchen that morning, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, scrolling through hundreds of comments, tears threatening to spill over, but never quite falling. I wasn't sad anymore. I was furious, not in the uncontrollable, shout-at-the-wall way. It was colder than that, sharper, like I'd been holding a knife back for too long, and now it finally fit in my grip. I opened the family group chat, still going strong. Avon had posted a picture of the lake at sunrise. God, this place clears my head, Isolde replied with a meme, a woman sipping coffee, and the caption, vacation mode, activated. And then, like she hadn't seen a single post or news article or viral thread, or maybe she had and just didn't care, Isolde typed, let's not make a big deal out of this, she's fine. That was it. That was her response. Not, I'm sorry. Not, how is she now? Not even a lie. Just that smug, dismissive little text. She's fine. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. Zinnia chimed in a few minutes later. I think Emery's blowing this out of proportion. It was a miscommunication. We all thought someone else had it. Then Vera, finally Vera, sent her first message since I'd rescued Grandma. I assumed someone would grab her. If I'd known no one was going, I would have left early. Don't turn this into something it's not. Turn this into something it's not. She was the one who'd said, we'll figure it out, in the group chat. The one who sent me a thumbs-up emoji when I'd asked if Grandma was covered. And now she was playing the victim? A part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to walk away. But a third part, the strongest part, smiled. Because I didn't have to say anything. The world was already doing the talking. I'd received 3 DMs from reporters asking if the woman in the photo was a relative. One of them had already figured out her name from a train manifest. Another said the city council might be using the image in a campaign on elder neglect. Strangers, absolute strangers, had offered more dignity in 12 hours than her own children had in a decade, and yet my family was still pretending they hadn't done anything wrong. I opened the folder I'd created the night before, the one labeled Truth. I uploaded the photo of the bruise. I added the station worker's text. I dropped in the screenshot of the unanswered message. I recorded a short voice memo, just the sound of Grandma saying, "I knew you'd come." Then I closed my laptop and sat back. I wasn't going to release it, not yet. I wanted them to sweat, to guess, to wonder if I would. The public might have already passed judgment, but the real verdict was mine to deliver. They'd already been judged by the court of public opinion. Now it was my turn. The envelope had been in her purse the whole time, and it was about to end every excuse they had. It was early, barely 7 a.m., and the apartment was still wrapped in that soft morning hush. Grandma sat in the armchair near the window, wrapped in one of my old blankets, sipping tea and flipping through the crossword section of a paper I'd picked up the night before. She looked rested, but there was still something about the way she clutched the mug, like her fingers were holding on to more than just warmth. I crouched by her suitcase, unpacking slowly, neatly folding cardigans and cotton blouses and placing them in a drawer I'd cleared out for her. At the bottom of the case, tucked beneath an extra pair of orthopedic shoes, was a small notebook. Hardcover, spiral-bound. Something about it felt personal, so I didn't open it right away. I brought it to her instead. "Is this yours?" She looked at it, then smiled faintly. "Oh yes. Been meaning to update that." She took it, opened the cover with care, and slipped out a thick envelope from inside the front page. Her fingers ran across the seal like she was smoothing out a wrinkle in time. "I wrote this a few years ago, meant to revise it again before the summer. But, well, things slipped." I sat down across from her. "What is it?" "My will." She said it so casually, like she was reading off a grocery list. But something in her voice shifted when she handed it to me. "It names you," she said quietly. I blinked. "Me?" She nodded. "There's still a portion for your mother and the others. I couldn't cut them out completely. But the majority, I left for you." "Why?" The word came out sharper than I meant it to. Grandma took a sip of tea before answering. "Because you see me, Emery. You always have, even when they treated me like wallpaper." I didn't know what to say. I opened the envelope gently. The document was clean, typed, notarized. The language was straightforward, with clear allocation of funds, assets, and property. And there, as promised, my name was listed first. Not just a token gift or a sentimental heirloom. This was real. A majority share of her estate, including the trust tied to the lake house. And suddenly, everything made sense. The vague responses in the family group chat, the deflections, the way no one could make it to the station, they hadn't just forgotten her. They'd intentionally kept her away, kept her from the house, from the gathering, from the chance to say anything. They knew about this will, or at the very least they suspected. I sat back against the couch cushions and let the truth settle over me like dust. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't miscommunication. It was strategy. A calculated, deliberate act of exclusion. They didn't want her to be there, not because she'd say something embarrassing, but because she'd say something true, something binding. They didn't want the guests to hear it. They didn't want Grandma to remember how much she still had power. And worst of all, they didn't want me to know. That afternoon, while Grandma napped, I sat at the dining table with her notebook, her will, and my phone. I opened the group chat. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to accuse. They were experts at twisting tone, at calling me emotional, dramatic, unstable. So I kept it clean, direct, and devastating. I attached a photo of the will, cropped to show the date, the official seal, and the line with my name on it. Then I typed, For the record, this is what you were trying to keep her from bringing to the lake house, and this is why none of you showed up. I hit send. Then I waited. The first notification popped up less than a minute later. Avon, can we talk privately about this? This isn't the place for that. Right, now it wasn't the place. Funny how the group chat was the perfect place for boat photos and steak dinners and jokes about vacation mode, but not for truth. Isolde, you're twisting things. You always do this, making us out to be villains. Zinnia liked her comment. Then Vera responded. A single message. I don't know what you think you're doing, Emery. That was it. Not, that's not real. Not, we didn't know. Not, she's fine. Just that cold, clipped sentence that said everything she didn't have the courage to admit aloud. I stared at my screen, feeling my pulse slow, not speed up. I expected rage. I expected chaos. Instead, what I felt was clarity. They weren't going to fight me with facts, because they didn't have any. They'd fight with guilt trips, with denial, with silence. But the truth was already out. The notifications slowed. No one else said a word. I stood up, walked into Grandma's room, and sat on the edge of the bed. She stirred, opened one eye, then smiled. Did you do it? She asked. I nodded. I did. She reached for my hand and squeezed it gently. Good, she said. They need to be reminded who I am. And who I am. By the time I hit send, it wasn't just my grandmother they had to answer to anymore. 6 months later, I watched her settle into her new room, and watched them lose everything they'd schemed for. Jed, it was a quiet afternoon, the kind where the sun filtered through the blinds just enough to warm the space without making it stuffy. Grandma's chair, the one we'd found at an antique shop in Pacific Heights, sat by the window, angled just right to catch the light but not the glare. A small table stood beside it, already holding her crossword book, reading glasses, and a ceramic mug that read, Best Nana Ever, in faded lettering. I'd had the apartment renovated back in January, took out the divider between the kitchen and living room to make space for her favorite rocker, swapped out my glass dining table for a round wooden one she could lean on without worrying it would tip. The biggest change wasn't physical, though. It was the feeling. The stillness was no longer empty. It was shared. Our mornings had found a rhythm. Tea, toast, a walk around the block if her knees felt up to it. Some days we'd sit on a bench in Alta Plaza Park and just people watch. She liked to guess strangers' stories. He's on his way to apologize, she'd whisper, pointing with her chin. He's bringing flowers, but they're the wrong kind. I'd laugh, not because her guesses were always funny, they weren't, but because she noticed, she observed, she paid attention, unlike them. Vera hadn't called since the day I sent the will. Isolde tried, once, a one-line email asking if Grandma was in good spirits, followed by a tone-deaf invitation to her daughter's birthday party in April. Avon had gone quiet. I heard from someone else that he was fighting with his financial advisor. Something about a trust he expected to access suddenly being unavailable. Zinnia had, in the most ironic twist of all, posted a long message about learning to prioritize family and the importance of respecting our elders. Comments were turned off. The lake house was listed 3 weeks after Grandma passed. I hadn't been back there. I didn't need to. The photos told me everything I needed to know. The listing featured the usual: high ceilings, lake view, gourmet kitchen, fire pit out back. But what caught my eye wasn't the amenities, it was the dining table. That table had once hosted birthdays, graduations, holidays, arguments, secrets, smiles so forced you could hear the teeth grinding behind them. And now, in the real estate photos, it was empty, staged, a bowl of green apples and not a single chair pulled out, sterile, silent, sold. After Grandma died, the will was executed exactly as written. The estate, the accounts, the residual assets, they all came to me. I didn't contest it. I didn't need to. There was no room for debate when everything was signed and sealed by her own hand. I kept what mattered, not the money, not the house, not the family name or some manufactured legacy. I kept the books she loved, the recipes she never needed to write down, and the necklace she wore to every single one of my piano recitals. I kept the quiet way she'd pat my hand when I was angry and didn't know what to do with it. And I kept her name, Eleanor, in my email signature, right beneath mine, when I started a community foundation in her honor. The others weren't mentioned in the legal process beyond a formal notification of disinheritance. There were no fights, no appeals, just silence. I suppose, in the end, they knew, and maybe they were embarrassed. Or maybe they just didn't care enough to try. Either way, it no longer mattered. What mattered was that she spent her last months being seen, being heard. She didn't sit on cold benches anymore. She sat in her rocker, with sunlight warming her knees, in a room filled with the sound of real laughter. The day she passed, I was reading to her. She'd fallen asleep during a chapter from the book she used to read me as a child, Anne of Green Gables. She didn't wake up. There was no pain, no drama, just peace. I held her hand until the nurse arrived. I packed her things gently, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Her scarf still smelled like lavender. At her service, there was no grand show, no speeches from relatives who hadn't called in years, just me and a few neighbors and some friends she'd made at the park. One woman brought a cake Grandma had taught her how to bake. We sang quietly, we laughed louder, and afterward we toasted with teacups, not champagne. Later that night, I sat at my own dining table. Mine wasn't polished to a showroom shine. It had rings from mugs and scratches from grocery bags dragged too hard. It wasn't picture perfect, but it was real. I poured myself a glass of wine, not because I was celebrating, but because I was grateful. Grateful that I'd walked out of that meeting, grateful that I hadn't let their silence become mine. Grateful that she'd known, when no one else showed up, that I would. They toasted without her once, but the last toast was mine. Sometimes, it's not the loud betrayals that leave the deepest scars. It's the quiet ones. The missed calls, the empty chairs, the silence when someone needed to be seen. This story isn't just about one forgotten grandmother. It's about what happens when we stop showing up for the people who once built our lives brick by brick. So let me ask you, who in your life deserves more than they've been given? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more real stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters.